glad I get to be in the middle because it gets worse and worse. Higher and higher.
What is peer-to-peer?
Yeah, well, for me personally, peer-to-peer is one of the core principles of Bitcoin. It goes around Bitcoin. So as it was described in the white paper, Bitcoin is peer-to-peer electronic cash. So yeah, for me, peer-to-peer is mostly about financial products, whether it's trading, whether it's lending, or anything else. So my perspective on peer-to-peer is purely from Bitcoin. It's not from the standpoint of communication. It's not from the standpoint of different things. It's mostly from the standpoint on how we interact financially between like people and between individuals.
I think there's some really good points. I think it's actually all in the name itself. Peer-to-peer. It's between communication, financial products, whatever it is, between equal peers. Nobody is special in these networks. Nobody has special privileges. It's all about equal rights between peers and freedom of choice between all these protocols. And that's super, super important. And that's very much not how the legacy world is set up. And that's why we're all very, very excited to talk about peer-to-peer, both in Bitcoin and in data and communications, which is more what we do with. And that's why and the overlap of that is very good. So yeah, it's all about networks, systems where everybody is the same and everybody has the same rights, and there's no difference between you being a data provider in the US or a small citizen here in Europe or whatever it is. Equal footing for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. And I think at the end of the day, just to take it again, layer on top of all the layers that we've explored, if you look at it in terms of civilizations and like the progress we have over time and evolution of civilizations, we still have to always contend with technological advancement to make sure that it adapts, one, to the way of life we're already accustomed to, and two, ways in which we can gain efficiencies in this new paradigm. So I think for peer-to-peer, the immediate thing for me is, okay, we now have the ability to communicate globally. We have the ability to transact globally out of Bitcoin. But then the challenge now becomes, we don't want to erode some of the existing structures we're already used to when it comes to actual peer-to-peer communications or peer-to-peer exchange. So I want to see how we could bring that into the digital realm with all the attendant benefits of digitizing that, but at the same time making sure that it does still feel as natural as saying, handing a dollar bill to another person as it is if you want to spend Bitcoin. So I think that's kind of what the framing is, at least from my perspective.
What are the main differences between P2P as platforms and as technology?
That's an interesting one. Without getting into the philosophical, I guess, jargon around the words, I think the way I look at it is on the technological side, this is the actual thing itself that enables people to communicate peer-to-peer. Now, on the platform side, really all that it is kind of like an aggregation of all these technologies, and then providing it in a way that's, one, convenient, two, at least looks great. Some people really care about that, make decisions based off of that. And then three, obviously blends everything to a point where it's like compounded benefits as a result of all these other technologies and how they work. So I say that's kind of what the key difference is. Now, in terms of how you want to build or contribute to that, it's a case of saying, do you want to do it at the layer where all these things are being integrated, or is it a case where you want to actually dig deep and contribute at the actual technologies themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I also think it's sometimes very confusing because it's two terms being used a lot, because peer is very broad. From the technological side, it's actually often very technologically complicated because it's all about making sure that you have systems where everything is provable, cryptographically sound, without having central entities verify this. And you can kind of translate the same terms to how it works in the financial world, where it's more about, well, peers of a platform can exchange things without the platform necessarily doing anything special. So it's still about trust in these peers, but it is about cryptographically verifiable trust and all this stuff. But I actually also think the technological aspect of this is one of the least interesting things about peer-to-peer networks, because it's all about just making things that, from users' point of view, scale, that are making things that users own, where they can take the platforms out of the game. Like, our biggest job as making peer-to-peer platforms is making ourselves obsolete, so that the users always are in control and can grow their data or whatever they're building themselves without relying on us. And that's our biggest job. And that term, I think, transcends all ideas of peer-to-peer. But yeah, so I think that's actually the interesting part of it. But yeah.
Yeah. So if we talk, first of all, I agree. It's getting harder from that side. Now it's harder for me. So basically everything you've been told, but I'll say that for me, like probably I want to touch base on the difference between peer-to-peer at the core level and difference between peer-to-peer platform tools and all that stuff. So for me, it's a matter of decentralization basically. So at the core level, if we take Bitcoin, that's the most decentralized thing out there in terms of technology. Probably, like, if we don't compare it to Nostr and or other stuff, there are other technologies, but in terms of financials, Bitcoin is the most decentralized thing at the core level as a system at all, on the base level. And then there's the platforms. So usually platforms are way less decentralized. And as I say usually, there's no actual real decentralization in everything that is built on top of Bitcoin. Right? You still have some central points of failure, even if you think, or even if you're trying to build like decentralized autonomous organization on top of Bitcoin, or you think that your exchange or your platform is very decentralized, there's still some I would say points, security holes that can be used not in your favor. For example, there's always developers who are doing your protocol or building on top of your platform. There's always business developer. There's always certain things that allows to pressure you. While on Bitcoin, I think we all globally, in a global scale, as a community, work in decentralized fashion. We don't like coordinate between ourselves what we do, but effectively by doing independently our thing, we're making Bitcoin stronger, and that's the main point of decentralization. We don't need any permission, we don't need any coordination, we just do our thing, and eventually we're making Bitcoin better every day.
How do you think these platforms will boost Bitcoin adoption?
So first of all, it should be non-custodial. That's the main thing, right? Everything, I strongly believe that everything which goes about Bitcoin should be non-custodial. Trading, lending, whatever. So there should be no custody at all at this point. And another thing is that I think Mathias already mentioned this, that UI UX for most of the people is a very important thing. If your product, platform, whatever you're building is not convenient, doesn't look good, doesn't work good, probably sucks. It can be the most securest thing, like very decentralized. Well, you believe that it's very decentralized, and a lot of other options, cheapest or even for free. But if it doesn't have a good user experience, then it sucks. People are not going to use that. And this is eventually what we are seeing, I think, in the last 2 years. I think that before that era, or before this bear market, let's say like this, it was mostly developers for developers. So we were building tools for like developers, Bitcoiners building tools for Bitcoiners. Now we see that, and I'll give you an example of HODL, if I might. We are actually already 12 months in a huge process of completely redesigning the platform as it built, so that people actually can easily use peer-to-peer trading, lending, they can interact. We're building the Lightning solution, which will be simple to use on a mobile phone, whatever. But effectively what we understood in, I think, last 2 years, that if you don't have a proper UI UX, even if you have very secure thing, even if your thing is highly reputable and everyone loves, and Bitcoiner community loves and support that, doesn't mean that people will use en masse your solution. So I think that the most crucial thing and the most challenging thing is to create a proper product on top of Bitcoin, which will be, as we say, even your grandma can use that. So that's a very important thing.
So true. Just to add a little bit to that, if I may, but because it's something we think about a lot at Hole Punch actually also, because we spend all our time developing really complicated peer-to-peer technology, and our app teams spend all their time making really, really simple apps
Yeah.
that hide all that stuff and never tell the users about it, because the users shouldn't need to know. And there's definitely a tendency in this centralization where you're so proud of being decentralized and you're so proud of being secure that you go out of your way to inform the user about it.
Yeah.
Where all the user wants to do is transact money
Yeah.
or send chat messages or something. And that's super important. And also, I think one of the things that's really, really interesting about adoption, and one of the things that peer-to-peer really can do, is that it actually lowers the barrier of entry for everybody. So I'm super excited about the world where, like, the lemonade stand down the street takes Bitcoin to buy lemonade because it's easier, because you don't need to set up a bank account, and it's just point to point, and like the friction there is super easy. That you can build peer-to-peer apps at your home, doing all kinds of small things or big things. Like the scale doesn't matter, because you can take the scale out of it, because that's what the technology unlocks, that everybody gets the same capabilities. It doesn't matter if you're as big as Amazon, or you're a bank, or you're a lemonade stand, or you're just a person sitting doing a podcast. You all have the same capabilities as long as you have a device, as long as you have a wallet or whatever. So it really takes away that friction, which is very, very interesting for adoption, I think.
Yeah, certainly, and 100% agree. I think when you're trying to build, first and foremost, really, the way to think about this at the end of the day is, if we're saying we're trying to garner more Bitcoin adoption in general, it has to reflect, again, like Max said, a lot of the core properties of Bitcoin itself, at least to the closest ability that we can. But more specifically, in terms of how we're looking at it, I'd say when it comes to the technology itself or what you're building, you have to make sure that everything ends up being as resilient as Bitcoin or contributes to Bitcoin's resilience. Because at the end of the day, if Bitcoin is just temporary, there's really no point of adoption, and it wouldn't even gain that adoption. Because one of the main key drivers for Bitcoin adoption, at least that we've seen on the ground so far, has been Bitcoin's resilience, which is why when shit hits the fan, people turn to Bitcoin. And the moment you don't have that, there's really no way for that virality when it comes to really Bitcoin. And I think, again, if you want to do P2P, the best way to go is definitely no KYC, because KYC is just inherently, it provides capture at any level and permissioned access. When it comes to building, you have to account for that. And another thing really we're seeing, which is kind of sits in between why folks still choose P2P, even though there's like custodianship with like Binance P2P as opposed to like a HODL, which is a way better alternative for people, especially in the long run, is we've also seen digging deep into some of the existing peer-to-peer markets also helps when it comes to how you're building, as opposed to saying, here's a platform, you can do all this P2P stuff. Whereas with the other approach is the case where, yes, we have all these cool techs and everything, but how do we already get all these existing folks that are agents on the ground with a lot of the liquidity, which really matters most to people, to Max's point. So I think thinking about those things and kind of building accordingly is the only way really you could, one, bolster adoption, and two, actually make it useful for people to come on board and transact as you want.
Why P2P and not just go on centralized solutions?
Yeah, I get to start. I mean, it's the simplest question in the world. I mean, it's like, I think you need to frame the question the opposite way. Why would you build centralized systems today? I've built centralized systems in the past. I think we all have been working on that. And it's kind of like same old. The incentives are different. It often involves you start a company, you get some investments. How can we squeeze as much profit out of this company as possible to pay this investment back? And how can we monetize the users and get the users to use your platform and squeeze as much money out of them as possible? And I've been through that cycle also. I think everybody in the IT world has been through that cycle also. And for me, it's all about making a difference, making something that makes the world better and makes the world stronger and makes it more resilient, especially in these volatile times we live in with everything is changing really fast these days. And I quickly had this feeling of like, I want to do something that allows people everywhere to solve these problems by themselves, like have communications and systems where the internet goes down. That's super important. That's what we need to be solving. That's what we as developers and engineers need to be thinking about every day. That's our duty. Unlocking financial transactions between people in rural areas or people that have like very, very unstable banking systems. It's essential for freedom these days, and nobody else is doing it. And like the big centralized world, like if you look at like the incentives there and like what people are looking for, and like what your governments are trying to fund. None of that is happening, right? If we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And that's why people listening to this podcast should quit their jobs and start working for our companies or start their own companies, because this is honestly, in my opinion, this is the most important mission of the world right now, technology-wise, and we all need to be thinking about this way, because this is the only way we can solve the difficulties of the future that are coming in really, really fast.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I personally started building the peer-to-peer solution, is that at some point in my region and in regions around me, nothing was available except for peer-to-peer trading platforms like local Bitcoins, for example. And we understood that local Bitcoins at some point is broken because they're custodial. And it's only a matter of time that when they will start doing the KYC, which they effectively did. And it's only a matter of time when they're going to be pressured because of that, which effectively happened. And it's only a matter of time when they will close themselves, which effectively happened as well. It's non-existing platform, unfortunately, at this point. So, and then we came to, I realized that actually peer-to-peer platforms, especially as Abubakar mentioned, no KYC peer-to-peer platforms are the solution for many people outside in emerging markets specifically. I don't like the term global south because I kind of think it's partly retarded, but it's okay. It's like basically globally available solution. You can scale peer-to-peer to any market out there, especially if you're building with the mind that it should be at least to some extent decentralized. Like the part of our platforms which is decentralized, that we don't have any wallets. Everything that is built it is built on top of multi-sig 2 out of 3, where we don't have any control over the user funds, and that's a crucially important thing. So these things can actually scale anywhere in the world, at any certain market in the world, as long as we have liquidity providers or as long as there's interest. So anyone in the world, even if you see that in your country there's no offers on HODL, you just go, you make your own offer for free, and bumps, you are doing the liquidity for your own market. That's how it works, and it's easy, scalable. Everyone can be onboarded there, and it's like in a minute of time you can be onboarded on basically on any peer-to-peer solution, whether it's communication or it's trading or it's lending, whatever. So it's affordable and it's available for everyone, just like a Bitcoin.
True, and I think at the end of the day, if you really think you have a good product, the best way to test it out is to get into the foray of building for some of these platforms, really, because at the end of the day, if you're serving a global, user base, it's a lot more difficult for you to say, I'm great because I think so.
Yeah.
It's really putting yourself at the end of the day, really, at the hands of the users for them to decide. And then becomes a competition about, 1, how well is your platform built? 2, how easy it is? And 3, are people comfortable enough to keep using that platform to keep it alive? Because the truth is, again, like Max pointed out, if you want the lights to still stay on in your company, you want to make sure that you're building somewhere where people do all the work, as opposed to you doing all the work of keeping the servers, compliance, KYC. Because again, another thing with no P2P platforms is you're now subject to so many controls and so many requirements that you'll never scale actually at the end of the day if you look at it at the time horizon. So it's one of those things where you want the scale, you want the reach, build P2P. If you really think you're that good, then stay in P2P and see how other people think. So I think that's one of those things where it's the greatest arbiter of truth, and I think most reflects the innate human behavior we already have. So it's both natural and the next logical thing for us to do.
What are the main challenges?
From the investor perspective, from the investor perspective, the immediate thing is, as soon as we hear something is not centralized, there's an immediate capture to make all the money back from obviously the funding we've given. We're kind of risk averse to that. So we tend to steer, not I, but people that don't really run VCs well, in my opinion, tend to steer a lot of these companies into immediate profit seeking, short-sightedness. And at the end of the day, for me as an investor, really, the way I see it is that isn't the way to go, because again, I want my investments to still stay alive in the next decade. It's not a case where we're chasing hot money, which is really the thesis of VC at the end of the day. But again, fraud, corruption, greed, about taking over. So I think that's kind of what the major challenge is, shifting that mindset and letting people know that yes, you can make money if you build P2P platforms. I mean, you can see that these guys aren't paupers, for example. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you let people know that that is possible. They should build that, and then everything else follows, really.
Yeah, it's really solid points. That's something we've experienced a lot in the past, because the world is very focused on a centralized mindset, especially in classical investment, because it's all about building. It's all about all the things we don't want to do. It's all about building moats, defending your things, locking people in, and make sure they don't go anywhere. It's like a prison, basically. The more prison, the better. And we're like, well, we want to build the opposite, because that's our mission in the world. And then you got to rethink things. Like any revolution, there's a point in the revolution in the beginning that's, there's an acceptance phase, and we're in the path of that. And there's so many examples in peer-to-peer where this has happened in the past. Like one of my favorite things is BitTorrent, because all investors hated BitTorrents because they were funding movie studios and stuff like that. And BitTorrent just said, tough luck, I'm going to give it away for free. And they tried to stop it and couldn't, because it's peer-to-peer. It's like one of those great, should be a Hollywood movie, ironically. Because they couldn't shut it down, and it's still active, and they couldn't shut it down, The only way they actually decided, to kind of deal with it was think about the different business models here that they could do it, and that's why we have Netflix and stuff like that, which then has a lot of centralized problems again. And I guarantee you the cycle is going to restart now, because they're going into the same mode that they did back then with modes and stuff like that, because they should have built a peer-to-peer alternative in the end. And that's why, that's one of the struggles with peer-to-peer today, because we're so locked into this thinking. And it's only now in the last couple of years I've seen a lot of these cool things pop up where we're actually starting to seriously think about this, not as hobby projects, but as serious businesses and serious projects. And I also think it's going to be, we have a lot of stuff to do for, helping users on board. Like one of the things, actually, ironically, that we always get asked in Keid is like, how do I sign up? Where like you don't sign up because you have the app, you own the app, and it's better. But people are so introduced to this, like, where's the entrance to the prison? Thinking that, we definitely have some education there to go. And I think the next years will be very interesting in that. And I think the things that will spring out of this is super exciting. And I'm personally very excited for the future also for that.
Yeah, we also have an interesting thing in Hodl when people asking, how do I fund my wallet? Like you don't, like you just fund an escrow and then you do what you do. But actually I can tell from my perspective 3 things, not one thing. Sorry, it's a tough challenge for me, but I'm probably gonna sum up everything that all industry participants who build the peer-to-peer trading or lending platforms are mentioning. First of all, it's of course education, educating people that there are these platforms that you can actually use and you can onboard, and then there's no like limits on what you can do. The second thing is liquidity. Like from financial perspective, liquidity is very crucial. We have some very robust, very liquid markets, and we have some very illiquid markets. So building a liquidity, a crucial thing, and for peer-to-peer it's very hard because there's no artificial liquidity. I cannot take money from investors, just invest in my liquidity and then you go, you're trading against your customers. There's customer against customer. It works like this. And the third thing, which I already mentioned, is UI UX. So these 3 things are very crucial for peer-to-peer to succeed, at least in terms of Bitcoin. So that's my 5 cents.